Raider Nation, good morning. It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, with some major NFL news from Adam Schefter over the past 24 hours. Coming up here on today's program, I'm going to give you everything that you need to know around the silver and black that has happened around this team from yesterday, from over the weekend. Also kind of going to just take a deep dive into some of this interesting reporting stuff that came down from Adam Schefter. Some of you might have already seen this before, and I'll be honest, I wanted to be able to do this video yesterday, but for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you'll see something on my Instagram, Twitter. Alex and I, we got our wedding certificate, marriage license yesterday. So her and I, we spent the whole day together. So usually I would do a better job of keeping you guys up to date, but with the NFL draft coming up this week, Monday was a day that I had to give to Alex. So first thing that we're going to talk about is all things Raiders, and then at the back end, I'll give you some of the more NFL draft stuff that Schefter believes that everybody out there needs to know. In one of the articles that Schefter ended up dropping, he talked about some players that he deemed expendable. So multiple players out there that he thought could potentially end up getting traded in, the NFL draft. And obviously, for those that don't know, we are going to be live for the entire draft on Thursday. Probably going to be 21 plus hours. 300,000 people were there last year. If you want to watch the NFL draft with Chat Sports, with me on the Raiders Report, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure those notifications are turned on. And I thought it was interesting that he brought up Tyree Wilson, because, I think that you could bring up a few other players as well. And I mentioned Wilson in a video, which I believe it went out on Friday or Saturday. Go check it out. It's players that I could see end up getting traded during the NFL draft, and Tyree Wilson was one of the names that I put up there. And I said because he's got 2 years left on his rookie contract, and I do think that teams could be interested in the number 7 overall pick from 2023. The other part about Tyree is he's had to deal with different head coaches, had to deal with different regimes. But I will say this. I am somebody that believes in Rob Leonard. I am somebody that believes in Patrick Graham. And if you can't put it together with those two guys, with this defensive line, especially when you've seen other players like K'Lavon Chasen been able to step up, Malcolm Kuntz be able to step up, I knew that Tyree Wilson was going to be a slow burn because that rookie year, again, Chandler Jones, the foot injury a little bit. But now it's year 3. Now it's time to put up or shut up for Tyree Wilson. And if they were to move on from him, I'd be a little bit disappointed. I still would like to see what he could put together in one more year, because if you trade him, you don't save any money. You end up eating $773 against the cap, and then overall you're eating $7.6 million. So, if you were out here doing it to save money, now obviously if the team offers the Raiders a 4th-round pick, that's kind of where I would say the value would be for Wilson. Anything besides that, I don't really agree with it. But, we got to think, Raiders brought back Malcolm Kuntz. You brought back Adam Butler. Kuntz plays edge. Butler plays defensive tackle, which is both of those positions that Tyree Wilson play. And then also the amount of depth that the Raiders have been looking at. I know for a fact this team loves Jalon Walker. And I'm not saying that Walker is in my top 3 players that I think that the Raiders could draft. I'll talk about that live today, about who I would say the top 3 players most likely that the Raiders to draft. But Jalon Walker is definitely in the top 5. And, when you think about how good this Raiders defensive line is and the interest there being in Jalon Walker, it kind of makes you think, oh, what exactly does this team, think about Tyree Wilson. And Wilson is a player that I've told him myself, you got to get to Las Vegas. You got to start working out with the team more, because he works out a lot down here in the DFW area. So not only are they showing interest, though, in Jalon Walker, another player to keep an eye out for, not necessarily in round 1 because they're picking at 6, but a guy if he ends up sliding. I don't think he slides to 37. Mykel Williams, also an edge from Georgia. Just keep an eye out for those 2 players. But to me, if they're interested in those guys, that could be bad news for Tyree Wilson. So my question to you is this, and this is going to be the pinned comment here on today's show, which means it's going to be the number 1 question that I want you all to answer. Trade or keep Tyree Wilson? If you want to trade him, type trade. Just let me know what you're looking for. If you'd like to keep him, type keep down below. My answer after this YouTube ad break. I'm going to go with keep Tyree Wilson because I actually don't know if there's going to be a team out there that's willing to give you a 4th-round pick, just considering of how underwhelming Wilson has been. I also look at the situation that the Raiders are in right now, and I know that this team values the trenches, and you can say what you want about Tyree. He still is a good trench player, even if it is just depth at this point. And if you want to be able to compete with some of these top teams, get after a quarterback, I'm hoping that Tyree Wilson is able to put it together, because if he does, and I know, if with Wilson, if he puts it together, look at the F out for our defensive line. It's going to be special. All right, let's go to the next part here that Schefter was kind of talking about in an article that he released yesterday. Again, it was an ESPN Plus article. Doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to the Raiders Report. And he was talking about players that he thought could be drafted higher than most. And he literally says, Schefter, quote, Missouri offensive tackle Armand Membou now looks like a top 10 lock, with the Raiders at 6 and Jets at 7 being possible destinations. I have given my 2 cents on Membou. Y'all know that I absolutely love him. If I was the one making the pick, I would be picking Armand Membou at 6. I just think he is an unbelievable offensive line talent that you're going to be able to have on your team, for 10-plus years, hopefully, and he's even good enough to potentially play left tackle. But I would say you just lot him in at right tackle and see where he's going. What I find interesting about that report, though, he mentions number 6, the Raiders, number 7, the Jets. The Raiders have not met with Membou. They don't have a top 30 visit. They didn't meet with him at the Combine, no pro day visit. And for an organization that really values relationships, I do find that to be, a little bit interesting. But I've also said, if you're a Raider fan and you want them to trade back, leaking out that you want an offensive tackle, I do think might be the way to do it, because quarterbacks in this year's draft are going to slide a lot further than what people think. And usually quarterbacks are the position where teams might be willing to trade up. I think in the top 10 picks, the player that teams might try to go up for, maybe it's a Mason Graham, maybe it's an Armand Membou, hell, maybe it's even an Ashton Jeanty, could all be those types of players, because right now, according to Schefter, the Bears are very interested in Jeanty. And there's a part of me that wonders if the Bears could even try to trade up to number 5 to Jacksonville to try to go get him because of all the interest around the Raiders. But I also wonder, if you're the Raiders and you do really want Jeanty, do you start leaking out that you're interested in some of these other positions? Do you leak out that you're interested in a right tackle like Membou? Because I'll tell you this, if the Raiders don't end up taking Membou at 6, I think the New York Jets are almost a lock to take him at number 7. So because of that, do you try to get a team to try to trade up if you're the Raiders and you want to end up moving back? Which, speaking of Jeanty and, honestly, even speaking of trading back, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit, but Schefter mentions teams willing to trade back or looking to trade back. From what he hears, the Raiders aren't one of those teams. So if Schefter's saying that, and he mentions a lot of teams, and I'll kind of go through them here in a moment, but for Schefter to say that he's not hearing that the Raiders are a trade back team, I do find that to be interesting. Ashton Jeanty was asked a few hours ago, when I say a few hours ago, it was yesterday, thinks that the earliest that he's going to go is number 6. And he said that he would like to be able to play for the Raiders, not saying like he only wants to play for the Raiders, but he said that the earliest he felt that he would go in the draft is number 6. And there was a lot of speculation of like what the Jacksonville Jaguars could potentially do. There was some speculation of, could the Jags take Jeanty at number 5? It sounds like it starts at 6 for Jeanty, and if the Raiders want him, they're going to have an opportunity to go out there and get him. But again, I don't know if Jeanty is going to be the most likely choice anymore. I would say there's 3 players that I would be a betting man to say the Raiders are going to go out and try to get one of those guys. Let's go to the next story here, and it's around another quarterback. It's around Jalen Milroe. This one's from Jeremy Fowler, and he reported that the Raiders are interested in Milroe, which, again, I don't think should surprise anybody. I did a video last week, and I know I say I did a video, but it's because I do a video every flipping day, and I want you to go check them out, where I said Jalen Milroe, there's a better chance the Raiders draft Jalen Milroe than drafting Shedeur Sanders. And a lot of people thought that was a crazy statement, but it's not a crazy statement, right? Like, I know the Raiders like Jalen Milroe. Milroe interviewed very well. He's been a player that's been connected to the Raiders for multiple months now at this point. But also, you got to look at rumors. And, I say that just because when the rumors came out that the Raiders were interested in Joe Milton, then it was reported that the Raiders were one of the teams, in fact, showing interest in Milton. That tells me that the Raiders are looking for a very athletic quarterback that they're going to potentially be able to put, behind somebody like Geno Smith and hopefully build up. Aiden O'Connell is not that type of athletic quarterback. He's not. Do I think that Aiden O'Connell is better right now than Jalen Milroe? Yes, I do. Do I think Aiden O'Connell is better than Joe Milton right now? Yes, I do. But do I think that Joe Milton and Jalen Milroe have more upside than Aiden O'Connell? Of course I do, right? And if you're a Raiders team and you know that you love Geno Smith and you know that that's going to be your guy for the next 2 to 3 years, why not try to go out and get a project player in Milroe? And if I was Milroe, I would want to go play for Chip Kelly as well. I did a show months ago about why I thought Justin Fields should want to play for Chip Kelly, and it's kind of all the exact same reasons. You want somebody that's a great offensive mind, that every place that he's ever done has been able to, design offenses that work best for the players around him. And if you're Milroe, you know that you got a lot of talent. You just need the right proper structure. And losing Nick Saban was a big part of, I think, a lot of his struggles. I also do think, though, the Raiders are going to be looking for players that, fit in a program. What do I mean by that exactly? Think about how often Tom Brady talked about, his development at Michigan. John Spytek, development at Michigan. And you're seeing a lot of the players that the Raiders are showing interest in were a part of a college program for multiple seasons out there, and they weren't just transfers. That's going to be something else that I do find very interesting. But I bring that up for Milroe because of he lost Saban and he lost, the Alabama Crimson Tide structure that Saban had. And for a quarterback like Milroe, I think that is, at the utmost importance. But there are some people that think that the Raiders could target Milroe in round 2. I do know that the Raiders really like Quinn Ewers. There's been some reports that the Raiders could take a quarterback on day 2. I just don't see it happening. To me, day 3 is the day that they're going to be looking, and there's going to be some runs on some other positions that I do think could end up pushing quarterback down. But, there's some people that think Tyler Shoug's going to be the quarterback too. There's some people that think Jalen Milroe is going to be the quarterback too. Jackson Dart's going to be the quarterback too. Shedeur Sanders could be the quarterback too. There's a lot of speculation around who that quarterback too could end up being, and I do think that ends up pushing a few QBs down the board, maybe one even like a Jalen Milroe. Because I'll tell you this right now, I'm not taking Milroe in round 2. We have way too many other needs to take a quarterback that's not going to play for 2 to 3 years. That's a recipe that I wouldn't quite understand. Before we get into some NFL draft rumors and news, I do want to just provide you guys with something before the draft, just to keep an eye out for it, because as soon as the draft is over, which again, we'll be live Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then the Chat Sports team, we come back in on Sunday, and we get you guys UDFA videos. If you're wondering, Mitch, how many UDFAs can the Raiders bring in? As it stands right now, the Raiders would be allowed to bring in 12 UDFAs. So the Raiders, they began their offseason program this week. 70 players are on the roster, which is 20 below the 90-player maximum. The interesting part there is, though, again, you still have David Agoa, who is the International Pathway Program player. Because he is the International Pathway Program player, you can technically keep 91 players on your roster. So because of that, the Raiders are going to draft 9 guys, 70 plus 9, 79. You can get up to 91. That's where the 12 UDFAs come into play. So let's get into the draft news and rumors around, I would just say, around everything going on in the NFL, which we all know is going to impact the Raiders in some way, shape, or form. Before I get into that, though, today's show sponsored by Game Time, the official ticketing partner of the Raiders Report. I do love this time of the year, being able to watch all these, NBA playoff games. Dude, it is absolutely electric. Baseball is here. And if it was up to me, I would love to be able to actually go to a playoff game, especially with the Rockets losing. I've been busting Chugs as you know what, because he's a big-time Rockets fan. But the ability to create those lasting memories and get, save some money while you do it is why I love Game Time. You can actually save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Game Time Picks makes last-minute ticket buying easier than ever by quickly highlighting the best deals in the stadium. You can see where you're going to be sitting, which, like the other day, I was on the app, and Alex's family, they're trying to go to a Rangers baseball game, and they were like, oh, we're going to sit on the third baseline. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Let's sit on the third baseline, because her sister was going to help us get some tickets. She works with American Airlines. So she's like, oh, we're going to sit on the third baseline. So I was like, all right, let me see where the tickets are. They were nosebleeds, So I was like, all right, well, that's not quite third baseline. But I think, having the ability for somebody that maybe doesn't understand, where the arena is. Because in my mind, I see section 300. I know that that's not third baseline. She thought 3 was third baseline. So I was like, all right, well, let's look at the stadium view. I was able to show her where the seats were. And she's like, no, that's not where I want to go. So now we're going to be sitting in right field in some game in May. But my point is, when you can see, where you're going to be sitting, you might understand it, but the people who are buying tickets all the time might not always understand. I bet you my mom probably would have thought the exact same thing. Section 300 is not third base, in case you're wondering. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS. That's CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. And if you're wondering what time is it, it's Game Time. That link's going to be available to you guys down in the links, down in the comments section and down in the description as well. All right, let's keep it moving here with some more notes from Schefter and just some more NFL draft rumors that I think that you guys should know. The Titans will be keeping the number 1 overall pick. They didn't say who they're going to take, but Schefter said that the Titans will be keeping number 1, and it's going to be Cam Ward, right? Cam Ward the other day on Fortnite was talking about the best running back in the NFL is Tony Pollard, and best wide receiver in the NFL is Calvin Ridley. He's going to go to the Titans, and we all know that. Next statement is going to be around Shedeur, and I feel like when I say Shedeur Sanders could fall out of round 1, instantly people are like, well, you just hate Shedeur Sanders. It's not true at all. I like Shedeur, and if anybody out there thinks that there's not a little part of me rooting for Shedeur to go to the Raiders, well, then you live under a rock, because Shedeur means dollars, bills. Shedeur means eyeballs, and obviously that would help me out a lot. It's just not something that I think would help out, the Raiders instantly, because, he's going to have to sit for 2 to 3 years. And again, I think like a quarterback like Shedeur, his ceiling to me is somebody like Geno Smith. And if you already have Geno Smith, maybe it doesn't make as much sense to get Shedeur. But I'll tell you this right now. Shedeur is probably the most difficult prospect to wrap my mind around, because I am somebody that believes he's got it up here, and this doesn't come easily. When you have a quarterback that's got it up there, there's going to be a team that falls in love with it. But then when you just look at, we'll just be real, the athletic gifts, the athletic traits, it's not a quarterback that should go in round 1. So it's going to be really interesting to see where Shedeur ends up going. But Schefter also mentions that, Shedeur is a quarterback that could end up falling a lot further, and could be a quarterback that, again, maybe falls out of round 1. Like, I would say that there was a better chance Shedeur falls out of round 1, or that the Raiders take Shedeur at 37, then the Raiders end up taking him at number 6. And what's crazy is, to some people out there, again, I don't think that's a crazy statement at all. At this point, if you think the Raiders are going to take Shedeur at 6, I got a really bad... You're just going to be depressed on draft night is how I'll say that. But Schefter mentions teams that he thinks could draft Shedeur Sanders. And he mentions the Browns, the Giants, the Saints, and the Steelers are all teams to watch for Shedeur. There's no mention of the Raiders in there at all, right? And he even mentions teams like the Browns and the Giants. And I think that those are a little bit more of teams that could trade back into the end of round 1, or even could be teams that look to take him in round 2 if he falls. Because, again, there are some people that say Tyler Shough is going to go above Shedeur Sanders. Jalen Milroe is going to go above Shedeur. Somebody like Jackson Dart could go above Shedeur. I would say no doubt Cam Ward is going to be the quarterback number 1. And then after that, it is going to be a crapshoot, because it's going to be up to what teams believe. I know Shedeur rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way. It's just a fact. I also think that, there's going to be some NFL teams. I talked to somebody over the weekend, and the person over the weekend told me Tom Brady probably knows Shedeur Sanders better than almost any NFL team out there right now, just because they've been able to work with him since 2020. If you don't think that other NFL teams out there value what Tom Brady says, you're crazy. So what do I mean by that? Tom Brady's going to pass on Shedeur Sanders at 6. If Tom Brady's going to pass on Shedeur at 6, somebody that has been his mentor, what does that tell you about what he thinks about Shedeur? It's not that he doesn't like him, but I think it's more that there's just value to be had at other spots, and I think that other NFL teams are starting to take note of that, because, again, it's not just that you're drafting Shedeur. And one of the other very interesting parts that, Schefter brings up that maybe fans and even myself really haven't even thought about is, if you're a coach and you draft Shedeur Sanders, you better know for a fact that your job is secure. And here is a quote from Schefter. Short of Pittsburgh's Mike Tomlin, any other coach who drafts Sanders better be comfortable with his standing with the organization. Because if that team struggles and the fan base is calling for a coaching change, speculation will start to swirl about Sanders' father taking over. I know Deion Sanders just signed a brand new deal with Colorado, and honestly, I hope Deion stays in Colorado, because I think what Deion's doing for college football is an amazing thing. He's building an incredible program, and I want to be able to see it, come into fruition, because I do think Deion is going to be able to recreate college football. He's already kind of doing it here in a little bit, and I would like to see him stay in college. I 100% would. But there's some truth behind that, and I don't think that Pete Carroll's necessarily worried about losing his job. But there are obviously teams that are drafting very, very high for a reason, because they weren't good last season, that I do think are going to be concerned about drafting Shedeur, because if that team struggles like it did the year before, then you're going to be looking at a Deion situation. And no coach wants to have Deion Sanders lurking over his shoulder, wondering if that's going to be the guy that ends up taking this job. So, very interesting. The next question I'm going to ask here, and I only got a few more minutes and then I'll hop on out of here. Will Shedeur Sanders go in the top 16 picks of the NFL draft. So I did 16. That's halfway through round 1. I think a lot of people would say yes to this. I think a lot of people are going to say no to it. And I don't know if there's I don't know if there is a single player where the fluctuation could fall more than somebody along the lines like Shedeur Sanders. So let me know, yes or no, will Sanders fall out of the top 16? My answer coming up here in just a moment. I do honestly think that Shedeur Sanders is going to fall out of the top 16 picks. If I had to guess, I think that there will be a team that probably ends up taking him somewhere in the 20s, but that can honestly change in the snap of a finger. I mean, we could see a team potentially try to go up and get him. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors around this time of the year, but the one team that I thought was going to end up doing it is the New Orleans Saints, and the amount of reports right now that are the Saints like Jackson Dart more than they like Shedeur Sanders. And when you look at the coaching staff that they have, it kind of makes sense why that team would honestly like Jackson Dart more than somebody along the lines of Shedeur Sanders. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I do not think Sanders gets drafted in the top 16 picks. If he does, good for him. I'm just here to give you guys my opinion. All right, let's keep it moving here. Also with some other stuff from Schefter. He talks about players that he thought could be drafted a little bit higher, and one of the names that he mentions is linebacker from UCLA, Carson Swessinger. Said that he could go in round 1. I was able to get Swessinger in round 3 in a mock draft the other day, and obviously, that value I got, I was skipping all the way home in our Chat Sports mock draft. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but then again, sometimes linebackers fall, but Swessinger, being somebody that Schefter's hearing could go in round 1, does make me wonder if there could be a little bit of a linebacker run earlier than expected. Jahdae Barron, Kelvin Banks, 2 players that he mentions. Banks isn't somebody that, you should really worry about for the Raiders. Jahdae Barron, though, I will continuously say, if the Raiders trade back in round 1, I almost might say Jahdae Barron might be the number 1 player that they target, depending on how far they move back, obviously. Like, if they go back to 11, 12, 13, I think Jahdae Barron could very well be the pick. A nickel slot corner who also plays safety a little bit, and that's what the Raiders need. They need a nickel corner. They still need a free safety, in my opinion. I like Isaiah Palamau. I like Jeremy Chin, but I don't trust either of those guys to be a true free safety in the National Football League. So because of that, I want somebody that can cover a little bit better. Jahdae Barron is somebody to keep an eye out for. Again, not somebody that I would say is a top 5 possibility at number 6, but there's a lot of love around Barron. I think that he could be drafted ahead of somebody along the lines of Will Johnson. Few more notes here. I know the Raiders obviously need a wide receiver. Schefter said, expect a day 2 run on wide receivers like in round 2 and round 3. Quote, 2 of those receivers that are likely to be Iowa State standouts, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Milroe. Others that could fall in the range include Washington State's Kyle Williams, TCU duo of Jack Besh and Savion Williams. Last year, there was a run on second-day receivers that included Keon Coleman at 33 to Buffalo, Ladd McConkey to 34 to the Chargers. There is expected to be another day 2 receiver run this year, which I agree with. We were talking about it. We did our Chat Sports mock draft last Thursday, and there was a huge run on wide receivers, and I think there's a run on receivers because this free agency class was a little bit weak. And then also on top of that, there's a big tier gap, I would say, with receivers that are going to go in the first 2 days and then receivers that are going on day 3. Big time tier gap there. I'm not going to overly panic because I do think the Raiders still are confident that they're going to be able to get a Tyler Lockett or Keenan Allen due to their Chris Beatty ties. But I'm still sitting here going, you probably need to draft at least 1 wide receiver in this year's class, which, again, maybe they try to trade back with all the holes that this team has. In terms of trades, he says expect the Eagles and Texans to be active. I think he's really just saying that because those 2 teams are active every single year. He also goes, on the other side of things, the Steelers at 21 are among the teams interested in moving back from their first-round slot. That list also includes the Jags at 5, the Panthers at 8, the 49ers at 11, the Falcons at 15, Seahawks at 18, Buccaneers at 19, Vikings at 24. So those are the teams that Schefter believes could potentially trade back in round 1 of the NFL draft. That's all the news and all the information that I got for you today. I know it's a little bit more of a laid-back show when I do them these styles, but again, a lot of stuff happened over the last 24 hours, and again, I apologize for not getting you guys a video yesterday when some of this stuff came out. Yesterday was an Alex Day. We got our wedding license, wedding certificate. It was an amazing thing, and it's pretty crazy. 45 days, and I'm going to be married. I'll see you guys a little bit later on today. I'm going to be going live 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific later on, the Raiders Report. If you're looking for even more content from the Silver and Black, don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button right here. I promise you I got you covered. If you're looking for even more videos from the Raiders Report, you can click this bad boy, or you can go ahead and click this bad boy. But if you do honestly click subscribe, please turn on those notifications with the NFL Draft. A lot of videos going to be dropping this week.